Hello and welcome to the Delphian Podcast.
Delphian is an artist-led nomadic gallery focusing on emerging and early career artists.
Each episode will feature a different art world practitioner, from artists and gallerists to collectors and curators.
If you like today's episode, please like, share and subscribe. Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Delphian Podcast. I'm Benjamin Murphy, as always, and with me is Nick J.S. Thompson.
Hello.
Today we're in the studio of Chiara Williams. She's an artist, gallerist and educator. She launched the WW Gallery from her house in 2008 and in 2012 launched the annual Solo Award at London Art Fair. Hello, and thanks for having us in your studio.
Hello, thanks for coming. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So, like us, you seem to have got many artistic, curatorial, educational projects going on at the same time. Why do you feel the need to be involved in all the different things at once? Do you think it feeds into your work?
I think like a lot of us, and I don't know if it's a generational thing, but we, maybe our parents or our parents' generation had that whole do one career, do it, and go and do that your whole life and then retire. And I remember when I was growing up, there seemed to be a lot of pressure at certain points, whether it was GCSEs or A-levels, to try and focus on what it is you're going to do, or what you're going to do when you're growing up. And I had things pulling me in different directions, and I always have. And I remember people saying, oh, you can't be jack of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none. People would always say that to me, you can't be doing all these different things. And obviously, if you're going to do something really well, it does require a bit of focus and determination. But I suppose I've sport for choice, really. I was lucky enough to have different influences and different interests that seemed sometimes a bit contradictory. And I always knew I wanted to be an artist, although from a very young age I also was, it was suggested to me that it wasn't going to be a financially rewarding path to take. So, like a lot of people, I sort of made sure I did all the academic things as well, and then did my teacher training after my art degree, did my teacher training as something, as my mum put it, to fall back on.
Okay, yeah.
And then ended up as an art history lecturer, also teaching life drawing, and then latterly teaching on foundation and access courses and that sort of thing. But that wasn't completely satisfying, and I found that when I was doing that, I didn't have the energy to make my work. So when I finally decided to start curating projects and running a gallery, I realised that actually, although it's really tough and again still not financially rewarding, running a gallery or organising exhibitions, projects, wherever they are, whether they're in a set place or whether they're pop-ups, does actually require a lot of the skills that I suppose I had without blowing my own trumpet too much. Because although I'm an artist, I'm not 100% happy if I'm just always in the studio on my own. I'm a people person. Yeah. I like social interaction. I get a real buzz from working with other people, from hearing about other people's work, and from putting people together and organising things. So, but also I couldn't just do that. That would also drive me crazy. So I need the balance. So I'm a people person, I suppose. I'm someone who's very at home talking to people, whether that's one-to-one or to like hundreds of people in lectures. I'm lucky that I haven't got that shyness that a lot of people do have. Again, it sounds like I'm being really arrogant, but I just have that. I'm quite relaxed about talking in front of people, even if I do sort of mumble and waffle sometimes. But so I think it was just a number of different things, and naturally an organiser, and naturally quite assertive, so that sort of led itself to organising exhibitions. And
so does the curation of other people's work and the teaching of other people's work influence your own work in any way? Or how you think about your own work and how you make it?
I suppose. I suppose I'm quite open, and I maybe do sometimes borrow steel from other people, but I found that when I started running the gallery space and it started to become more serious, with show after show after show and all the promotion and marketing involved and all that, my own work completely took a back seat. Because it just wasn't sustainable to do the two. Being although I said before that being an artist and being a curator are two definitely both skill sets sort of within my skill set. It is a different hat, I suppose, and so my own work took a back seat. Also because I didn't have a studio at that time, and what I found and what my co-curator Deborah Wilson, what we both found together, especially curating things together, was that it was a really creative process in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I heard you say, and I've heard other people say, that it became, the exhibition became a whole work, as a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, so we were, at the beginning especially, we were doing quite a few group shows that were thematically linked by a kind of overall vision that we had, and that was a way of us flexing our muscles, trying things out, and assembling artists and working with different people and sort of seeing who we worked well with and who worked well with each other and that sort of thing. And yeah, I hadn't expected curating to be as creatively rewarding, and I think it just, for me, I just put all my creative energy into that, and that's why I wasn't making my own work.
I think it's a shame that more curators don't see the curatorial act as creative as it is.
Well, I don't know. I think it depends who you are, because it seems that the role of a curator is quite loose. Historically as well, to curate comes from Latin curare, which just means to look after.
Yeah.
So, curators of big museums like British Museum and stuff, they are guardians essentially of the collection, looking after it, keeping it in order, injecting new life into it when necessary. It's a different, the way that the verb to curate came about in the sort of mid-2000s, and after that it got ridiculous at one point. I mean, people were curating gigs.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't sound that strange to say curate a gig, but at the time, people were curating your outfit, curating a gig, and it kind of got a little bit ridiculous. Became a very, very sort of overused word. And I think the meaning and role of a curator depends on where their background is.
I suppose I just meant I'm kind of sick of just going to a gallery and it's all the paintings the same size, they're hung on the same level, and it's just stand in the middle and turn your head and you're done.
Yeah, well, that's not really curating. That's hosting an exhibition. But that's how I see it. Yeah. There will come a time when you probably will be so tired of doing creative curating that you will want just to have. Oh yeah, it's quite nice to just have one. When you just stick the.
Well, for certain types of work, that is the format that works best.
But yeah, it's a lot of work doing that creative thing, and also keeping that then balanced. If you are, as a curator, doing something that is really creative with other people's work, then there's sometimes a fine line, isn't there? There's and there has to be a negotiation and a dialogue with the artist. Like they have to know, it's got to be a two-way thing. So so a lot of the time artists would make work, we commissioned work for shows obviously, and I'm sure that's what you're doing. But yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed it.
How did you get started doing it with your partner? And
so I was teaching at that point in a sixth form college in Hackney. Yeah. And my new friend, who was Deborah Wilson, was the sort of head art technician there. And we just hit it off and planned our escape.
Yeah.
And talked about trying to find a space, and this was in 2004, 5, 6, sort of, you know.
Yeah.
We were actively looking for spaces in Hackney, from, you know, approaching the council, looking at disused spaces. But it was still when property was booming, so it wasn't feasible for one reason or another. And we ended up using my house, which is a Victorian terrace house on Hackney Downs.
Okay.
And sort of just emptied it out, painted the walls grey, floors grey, walls white. And we, over the course of the summer, we sort of just did that transformation, and then we had a show, which the first show was pretty much us and some of our friends, and we didn't want it to be that forever, but it was just a way of kicking things off.
Yeah.
And I suppose that was when we started to discover how creative it could be, and also how, I mean, again, around that time, more people were talking more and more about artist-run spaces. There were other artist-run spaces, but it was, I mean, there were artist-run spaces that had been running for ages, but in terms of being publicly talked about or articles written about, it was sort of still new-ish. And I think we felt that being artists and curators and gallerists and doing that crossover meant that we, you know, could hopefully bring a better deal for the artists and potential collectors, and, you know, just sort of mix it up a bit.
So there's kind of a lot of artists curating exhibitions in unusual spaces nowadays, and I think it's probably due to the kind of the insane rents that hiring spaces involves. What are some of the kind of challenges or freedoms that doing a show in your own house presented?
Freedoms obviously were financial. It made a big difference because we could take risks, and we didn't have to think about being commercially viable.
Yeah.
Which is something that we didn't really ever want to do. We wanted to sell work for the artists and for ourselves, but we wanted that to be a byproduct. We didn't want to be focused on that. We wanted to be experimental and really project-based about how we were approaching things. We wanted to give artists free rein, and commission things. And so the house was transformed, you know, quite drastically a few times. But the constraints were that after a while, the space becomes so familiar that you start to kind of get itchy feet. And so because of that, we did quite a few off-site projects, which I can talk about. And the other thing that was limiting about it was a Victorian terrace house, so domestic proportions, albeit very, very light and, you know, beautiful high ceilings. And actually the good thing about it was it doesn't really have any, it doesn't have any period features really, because there'd been a fire, I think. So it was just very kind of, it was like on the outside of Victorian Terrace, but when you go in, although the room proportions were that, it was quite sort of clean space. But those domestic proportions obviously did inform the kinds of works that could physically get in there, and also just suit the space. And so as a result, you know, as our reputation grew and people started to want to collaborate with us, there was a spate of, I mean, I think we did one show, we did a couple of shows that played on the domesticity of the space, you know, the domestic proportions of it.
Yeah.
And thereafter I got so many people sending proposals in for kind of domestic based shows that I just thought, oh God, what makes them think that we're gonna want to do another 10 shows around that same kind of thing, you know? So I found that a bit limiting. And the location, it was a bit still of a no-go.
Yeah.
Then that part of Hackney Downs, it was just off what was called Murder Mile. But we did benefit from things like First Thursdays we were involved with from very early on. And I remember being really excited when the First Thursday's coach came up and parked there and they all spilled out.
Yeah.
And it was really nice. So, yeah, and then personally, limitations were that I was living in a very cramped, like I had all the furniture and all my stuff sort of in one small room, my bedroom. And at first it had been quite a novelty to trip through this empty space to get through to get to my kitchen, which was hidden, and it's quite a novelty living in a gallery. And then after a while it got kind of boring.
How long were the shows on for?
So in that space, nearly 4 years.
And were they consecutive?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you just, wow.
Yeah, so it was full on.
Yeah, that sounds intense.
It was intense.
Yeah.
We did sort of, burn ourselves out a little bit. I mean, there were little gaps here and there, but we were raking up 8, 9, sometimes 10 shows a year, and seemed at that time to have limitless energy.
What about the off-site projects? What were some of your favourites of those?
So the first one to mention is Venice Biennale.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were still on that very first show in 2008, September, which by the way is also when the recession, the news, and we didn't feel it. First, we made some sales in those first few shows and we were like, oh, this is great. But around then, September, October, I got it in my head that we were going to do the Venice Biennale. And a few of my friends said, oh, maybe you should just take it easy and see how it goes first. But because of the fact that Biennale is only every 2 years, and 2 years seemed ages.
Yeah.
Mm.
So we got ourselves organised and decided just to do a guerilla, an unofficial show of some description. And we knew that it wasn't going to be sustainable if it was just me and Deborah organising it. So we paired up with a curator called Sophie Wilson, no relation to Deborah, but a friend from what was then Pharos Gallery. She now heads up her own media agency called Tuesday Media, and isn't really in the art world anymore, but she was part of the team, and we gathered there are 8 of us together, 8 women, some artists, some curators, and we just sort of set about organising this show, which the remit for which was, how can we do a really attention-grabbing show in Venice that is unofficial but will involve as many people as possible and on a really tiny budget, and what theme can we work around that, or how can we hold it together? So I came up with a title, Travelling Light, and
seems apt.
yeah, and that was the focus of it all. So what we set up is we set up an open call, which unfortunately I know it's controversial, but we did charge people to submit work to be part of this Venice Biennale show, and that is how we funded our trip there and the venue and everything. We hired a beautiful residential flat, which was not strictly legal because anyway.
Yeah.
But we did that knowing that we might get tripped up by the local police, but that we were willing to take that risk and that we were doing it as a guerrilla thing anyway. We all the works, the open call was basically everyone had to send work in an A4 envelope. That was the maximum size. It could be a padded envelope or a normal envelope, and then the work could be any size as long as it fit into that envelope.
Okay.
So those were that was the dogma. And then we had some amazing imaginative things that blew up, things that unfolded, paintings, sculptures, all sorts. We had about 500 entries.
Wow.
Which was a lot considering we were brand new, and we did it internationally, so of course it was administratively very full on for us. But anyway, in the end we took 58 artists, and the reason for the Travelling Light thing was that we had the show first in my house in London in the gallery, WW Gallery, and then we packed it back up again, and then we took it in our hand luggage.
Nice.
And we put all of our clothes and things into the hold, but we had all the work in the hand luggage, and all 8 of us were on the plane, the same plane that all the other journalists and people were going to the Venice Biennale on. And then we were handing out leaflets to the journalists on the plane saying, our Venice Biennale show is in the overhead lockers. And so, really just maximising on any gimmick we could, because no one knew who the hell we were.
Yeah.
And it was great, and we had a lot of really positive reaction. The work was also good quality work and imaginative work, and And so then, so the show, also because of the fact that the gallery was in a domestic space, it also then made sense. So it wasn't completely arbitrary that we hired this apartment that had had its own fireplace with a mantelpiece and had it was mirroring the London space, and as much as possible we hung it in a way that mirrored the London space. And so it just worked really well. It worked really neatly. So that was one of the big things for us, even though it was right at the very beginning. 2 years later, we did another Venice Biennale show, and that was called Afternoon Tea, and that was again in a residential apartment, but bigger and grander this time. The exhibition was in the entrance hall downstairs off Campo San Polo, which is a main square, so very easily accessible. And for that we again had this time it was works on paper, A3 size, and the gimmick this time was that we were making and serving afternoon tea and sort of proposing ourselves as an outpost of the British Pavilion, because in the British Pavilion, or the British Pavilion in Venice, used to be a tea rooms. We were sort of doing that. And both times, so the second time we had about 70 something artists, I've forgotten exactly, but we were emboldened by what happened the first time, because the first time, although we'd set out to be, as I said, unofficial, the British Council, I did send the information to the British Council, and they did list us on their map. So we were listed with the Scottish and the Irish and the British Pavilion and all of that, and that was amazing. And that's why we got into trouble as well, because the police then was like, But that was all part of it. They sort of we ended up having to take the show down a day early, but it's all part of the excitement. But then the second time we ran it as a private event, but we were still on the map, on the British Council map and on all the official maps, but without having to pay the, I think, €25,000 fee that you have to be an official event. And so people had to make bookings for afternoon tea, and then while they were having their afternoon tea they could peruse the work. And so we did it like that, and it was great. We had Mike Nelson and all the official people came. And it was really nice. So yeah, that was like probably my favourite off-site thing to do. But there are others. But
so tell us about the Solo Award, because it seems like a lot of what you do is very like inclusive and artist run and kind of community based almost. So can you tell us about the award? And kind of...
So
that's still running, right?
Well, it's actually
last year.
It happened. It's actually on pause this year, and I'll come to that in a minute. But the reason we set up the Solo Award was, and I don't know if you're finding this yet, but when we set up, we're artists running a space for other artists, and we were very, down to earth and just getting on with it. And then, as the reputation grew, we were getting more and more emails from artists, because at first the challenges are, who are we going to show and like what, and then all of a sudden you're like inundated. We were inundated with artists, and then there are only 12 months in the year, only we couldn't possibly support everyone. And so whilst yes, the intentions were to try and be inclusive and democratic and everything, then you kind of find yourself, oh no, I get it why those big galleries sometimes just don't answer your emails and stuff. It got overwhelming, and there was just me and Deborah, and we're not paid for our time, and you can't, if you get an email from someone saying, oh, please have a look at my work, tell me what you think, you can't just you can't give it a 30-second reply. You have to you either have to put it in a file, I'm going to look at that later, or you have to look at it, spend time looking at it and give it a considered response. And that was the problem we had. We had a lot of amazing people sending us stuff, and we also had jobs, and we didn't have the time to manage it. So we thought, let's try and, cynically, in a way, let's try and monetize that a little bit. Not that we want to rip off artists, but if we're going to be looking and giving feedback, we also need to be paid for our time. We started doing artist surgeries. That was another thing we did, where we charged people and they would come and we'd like look at their portfolio and try and kind of give them structured support and blah blah. And then the other thing was the solo award, which was a way of, when people approached us with work that we were like, oh, this is quite interesting, but we haven't really got any time or any space, any opportunities, we'd say, have a look at this solo award we're setting up, think about submitting your work to that, and then, you know, we can have a look at it in that context. And that's sort of what we did. We tried to start funneling all these inquiries into the solo award. And yeah, so we've been having sort of 500 to 600 entries every year for the solo award. And it also meant that by getting guest judges for it every year, it's hard to, you know, giving feedback to artists individually if it is fine, but no one likes to be, as an artist myself who applies for things, it's not nice particularly being rejected, and it's also not nice to reject, or not, one shouldn't say reject, just not select.
Yeah.
And so and then you know that there are awkward situations where it's a friend of a friend, or it's a friend, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god,
Yeah, we definitely found that.
Yeah.
you know how, you know, and then, you know, you're worried about being accused of nepotism, you know, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't sometimes, and it's a really, really tricky one to balance, and the only way is just try and be transparent and try and just be honest and tell people that it's really hard. And so we set up the Solo Award, which was a competition, if you like, but we invited guest judges. So we've had some amazing judges. We've had Alison Wilding, we've had Robin Klasnick from Matt's Gallery, we've had Kate Davis, we've had Charlotte Mullins, we've had Kerry Hand, just some great people that come on board, and they have looked at all the work with us, and then we've had long lists and short lists, and then the winner, the first 2 years actually, the winner from 2012, the first 2 years the winner had an exhibition in our gallery space, which by that point was in Hatton Garden, because we moved in 2012 to a space in Hatton Garden. So they had a month-long show, and then we thought that actually it'd be more valuable to have for the winner to have a stand at the London Art Fair.
Yeah.
It comes with its own challenges, because there's obviously a difference between putting on a solo show in a bespoke gallery space compared to a stand. But I maybe because me and Deborah have both always been attracted to sort of slightly perverse, things that don't quite fit. People are like, oh, you're a not-for-profit, why would you go into this commercial, commercial art fair that doesn't really, it seemed a bit of a strange one, but I quite liked that idea of curating something that, for which we didn't need to sell, but that selling could be a good byproduct. So that became the prize, the stand at the London Art Fair, plus £1,000 prize money, plus, of course, that we always worked quite closely with the winner each year, between the time that the prize was announced, which is sort of end of May, beginning of June, until the show in January. There's a 6-month period for them to develop new work. It's been surprising every year. I've made some really great new friends through it. And it's so different. I mean, what I was going to say is, when we started way back in 2008, we did lots of group shows. But then after a while, obviously I recognised, whether it was the Venice Biennale or a group show in Hackney, in WW, group shows are really, 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 really admin heavy.
Yeah.
And very, exhausting, or can be exhausting, especially if there are a couple of artists who just aren't bringing stuff on time and all that kind of stuff. So I think we moved gradually, and I think it's a natural move, towards working on solo shows and maybe 2-person shows. And that was something that really just, was a natural process, because I don't think when you're starting out you're necessarily ready to do a big solo show with an artist that you don't know. So you work with people on and off, maybe in a solo show, in a group show here, and another project there, and you start to kind of find who you gel with, and you start talking about projects, and maybe projects develop over the course of even 2 or 3 years. You're like, oh yeah, it would be great to put those two artists together at some point, and it maybe doesn't happen for ages, but those things kind of organically develop. So the Solo Award was a way of sort of formalising that as well, and it was more democratic because it was us meeting new people that we didn't necessarily know, and so I've really enjoyed that, whether that was Victoria Lucas or Frances Richardson or this year's winner Il Kwon Yun. It's always been a real eye-opener, and I've learnt a lot from the process. So yeah, Il Kwon had his show in January. That was amazing. It got a lot of press, a lot of attention because it looked really stunning. The stand looked stunning, and we sold a lot of his work, which was amazing. That's the best year we've had so far. Then normally I launch the new call at the same time, and then we have the deadline around now, end of March, beginning of April, and then we have the whole. But it's a big undertaking because it is a whole year-long project. So it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
So it's the whole getting a new load of judges on the deadlines, getting all the submissions in, and then we had a group show, I should say. There's a group show of the shortlisted artists, and that's what we did at Cello Factory the last few years, and that happens at the end of May. And sorry, I'm probably going a bit upside down, back to front here, but because I've been running it myself the last couple of years, and I also have a very young daughter, I just had to take a break this year.
Wow,
simply. And so it's on pause, so I didn't launch the new Solo Award open call this year. And a lot of people have sent email inquiries and asked about it. I've been looking at maybe trying to get some sponsorship so that I could take on like some staff to help me administrate it, or just I've got to rethink it really and see if it's something that we pick up again next year, or sometimes these things just need a bit of a shake up. It's been great for the artists. I mean, Il Kwon at the moment has got a show on that's come directly out of the London Art Fair. He's got a show on in Turin, and that's ending this weekend, and that's been really great. I'm some of the other Solo Award winners I've continued working with, and I've shown them in Margate. So that's it's not like we don't just work with artists and then just drop them. We can't throw 10 grand prizes at them, but we try and give them other forms of enrichment.
Yeah. So what sparked the move down to Margate? How long have you been there? Because it seems like there's a very flourishing art scene here.
Yeah. I didn't even realise that there was.
Maybe you created it.
No, definitely not. No. The studio block we're sitting in now, Limbo, has been here since 2003. Mm-hmm. It's the oldest, the longest standing artist studios and project space in Margate, way predating Turner Contemporary. And it's on the site of a former substation. Well, it still does provide power to a lot of Margate. So there have been artists here for a long time. Funnily enough, that first Venice Biennale show I did, Travelling Light, one of the artists who was in that show was Paul Hazelton, and he started Limbo. And I remember him back then, 2008, telling me about this studio building he had set up in Margate, and I didn't dream that years later I'd be here myself. So that's a weird one. But Turner Contemporary itself also used this building. Downstairs, the whole of the downstairs was a project space at the beginning, and there were only a few studios. So Turner Contemporary used this for a year before they opened in their new building. They also used other shops in the town, and other curators have done projects here. But yeah, so there was a thriving scene before I came here, but I didn't really know about it. I mean, I didn't really know about it only because I'd been a bit off radar. So when I was in London and I was running the space, I was really plugged into everything, And when we were running WW, me and Deborah would go to loads and loads of openings. I think, after a while one can get a bit jaded, and the whole art scene and the private view scene can get quite exhausting. And I think when you're feeling a bit jaded, it's time to just take a break. Don't want to burn out, and also I didn't want to be false, and it's really important for me that that if I'm doing something I'm really, really into it, that the enthusiasm is genuine. And there were times when, we were struggling for various reasons, and I just thought, oh God, I can't do this anymore, it's exhausting. And that's not a nice place to be. I then stopped working with Deborah around about 2013, 14. We still were doing we had some great shows going right up until the end. There was one that we took up to Middlesbrough, to Platform A Gallery in Middlesbrough. That was a North-South Divine, it was called. It was again a sort of a show that moved across two spaces that involved Alison Wilding, and that was great. But around that time we sort of dissolved things at the Hatton Garden space. I also then found out that I was pregnant, and that was another reason for me to slow down a bit and kind of reconsider things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then when my daughter was about 8 months old, I set off with my then partner on a sort of road trip around Europe. I always got to that point where I was a bit tired of London and needed a break. Yeah. And so that was kind of an art project as well. It was a red van, and we had a website called theredvan.weebly.com where we sort of made work in the van. The van was also a gallery, and we stopped in different places outside galleries and sort of did little pop-up things. And that's sort of, I met artists and galleries and things around Europe. But anyway, so we were travelling, and then we'd had enough of travelling. I'd had enough of living in the confined space of a van.
Yeah.
Living in another gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah, driving, breastfeeding. Yeah. It got, it was amazing. We spent 7 months in Sicily in an apartment there, and that was absolutely beautiful. My daughter learnt to walk in Sicily. That was great. But then it was sort of time to come back, and I think I also came back for Freeze and for some other things, just like admin stuff. And then we thought, let's spend a bit of time back in the UK, but didn't want to be in London. And I also have a dog that I forgot to mention. He died in August, but a lovely dog who had arthritis and needed to swim. And so it was very much look at a map. Where's near London and cheap and near the sea? And we were looking at Norfolk and Suffolk because I've got some friends there, and then a couple of people I knew down here. And I hadn't looked into... No, that's not true. I did know a couple of people who were here and said that there was this art scene going on. But I kind of ignored it. In my head, I wanted to have nothing to do with that for a while. So I thought, it's nice if there's a bit of culture, but it's going to be... I was probably a bit... I know, like, who is it? I know Amy McKenny, who set up TAP in Southend, and I know other people. Over the years, me and Deborah did research lots of kind of coastal and out of London places, and often the group that are trying to do something new and innovative are come sort of banging their heads against local or sort of more provincial ways of doing things, or the slightly different tastes and stuff like that. So I remember Amy saying that in Southend, the local artists didn't really like them coming in and trying to do this sort of thing. So I kind of thought, if I'm going to Margate, I'll just do my work and just chill out and just take myself out of the art scene for a bit. And then I got here and sort of realised, I suppose in the sort of month or so before coming, that there was a lot more happening. And then I started meeting people. It's a small scene. There's Crate next door, there's Bon Vokes, But there are lots of things, and so I quickly realised, oh my god, there is loads, and then I just ended up by default doing stuff, having said that I wasn't going to.
Right. Well, good.
Yeah.
So I started, so things like the first thing I started doing was dry run, which...
Headley did that recently, right?
Oh yeah, you know Headley
Yeah.
and Sian. Yeah, so Headley did a dry run, and Sian also, his partner, wife, who's an artist as well, she also did a dry run. Yeah, so I set up the dry run as a kind of art crit thing from my flat. This was before I had the studio here, as a way of to create a little community of artists talking and showing work, and I very much wanted it again. I was thinking about when we had run the gallery, what worked? Well, what always worked was the private views, always worked. They were great, everyone comes together and hopefully not only has a drink but also looks at the work. And if they don't, I'm like, oi, look at the work. So that and the talking and talking about the work in progress, and that's what you miss when you're not at art school and when you're not in a studio. You miss that, talking to your peers and pinging ideas off each other. So that's why I set up Dry Run. It was like a test bed thing. It was, and the idea was that it's not a gallery, but people brought work and they did sort of hang it in a room in my house. And it needed to be work that was in progress, that maybe wasn't completely resolved, maybe they weren't sure where it was going. And so I invited one artist, and I asked them to invite another artist that I didn't know.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So I started off inviting people that I did know, and then that's how I expanded the network, and they invited someone I didn't. It sort of took off. So, and rather than having the hassle of having a gallery in my house like I did with WW or like with the van, it was just a one evening thing, one evening a month, and it was really nice, and it was focused, and I was quite. It was a very structured evening, so people would arrive, they'd be directed to look at the work, grab a drink for half an hour, mill around, then I would introduce the first artist, and they would have 10 minutes to talk about their work, or so, and then there'd be questions and interaction, and then I'd introduce the second artist, and then they talk about their work, and then we'd all sit down again, and then there might be a dialogue or a sort of conversation between the two artists, because sometimes there were reasons why they had chosen the other artist, either because their work resonated with each other, or it might have just been a circumstantial thing, or that it might be completely different, but there was always something to talk about. And so that was really interesting for me, and I got to know lots of great people that way.
Right, well, if you're in Margate, or I suppose you don't have to be in Margate, you can get the train down.
I'm not doing it at the moment.
Right.
I took a break from that as well.
Okay.
But I have a lot of people emailing me about it. I've taken a break from Dry Run.
Are you planning on starting it back up at some point?
I might do at some point. I'm trying to, like a lot of people in Margate, I'm trying to do some building work, decoration work on my flat.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even though that was only happening once a month, it's sort of hard to do anything like that.
Move everything
So that's paused for that reason. And the other thing that I did here was create this exhibition with Sean Stamp in the Nathan Rock Hotel, which was the At the Violet Hour show. So that was quite a big show. That completely blew my expectations of organising a show in Margate. I didn't really think that we'd have that many people come. 500 people came to the opening, and 3,000 people came to the run of the show.
Wow.
It was super successful, and I think it was super successful not because the work was great, but not just because the work was great, but also because it was this iconic old hotel, this building that a lot of people were curious about and had never been inside. It was, I suppose my approach to it was, so Sean Stamp, he's both based in London and here, he said, I've got, I might be able to, I might be, he knows the owner of the hotel, who also owns the Sands, I might be able to put on a show here, but I can't organise a piss up in a brewery. Do you want to help me? And I was like, I don't know, and then I went and saw the hotel, and then I thought about the Turner Contemporary were doing this Wasteland exhibition, and I'm a huge T.S. Eliot buff. I'd studied it at school, and although he's, wasn't the nicest man in the world, but I just really love his poetry, and I knew it inside out, and I thought, oh, this is too good an opportunity not to capitalise on. So I said, okay, let's do an exhibition at that hotel because you've got the access to it. Let's tie it in with Turner Contemporary and with their Wasteland show. Let's get a group of artists together to respond to the Wasteland poem and just very simply allocate rooms to different artists. I mean, there are like 80 rooms there, but some of the rooms were still in use for student groups and things, but the 2 top floors were, it's in such disrepair, the building, so there were windows that were broken, pigeons had got in, filled with pigeon shit. Other rooms were just leaking and mouldy, so there were some rooms that we couldn't even use because they were toxic, and then there were others that we couldn't use because they were being used for students. But we had about 25 rooms that we could use. We had to work on quite a tight schedule, which meant that we weren't able to get the fund. We applied for the funding, but there wasn't enough turnaround to tweak our proposal and get the funding. But it was important to me, I felt, that we opened on the same night as Turner, and that we, again, very cheekily, a bit like me and Deborah did at the Venice Biennale, I told Turner what we were doing. I said, they were doing an outreach thing anyway, sort of. There were lots of other people who were tying into the show, and they were creating a map. So we told them what we were doing, and I said, cheekily, after your show opens, why don't we have all the people from Turner come to ours and have that sort of after party at ours, really kind of crazy old 70s dance floor bar thing in the basement, and and so knowing that people's curiosity would be piqued, and they'd come for that, and
they did.
And they did.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was just amazing, but also the work was good, and so the journalists came, and we got written up in the Telegraph and the Times and a few other places that it's all online. I can't remember now. It was really good, but it did exhaust myself and Sean. It really knocked it out of us because it was then it was on for 6 weeks, and every weekend was just full of people, and people were coming back several times. Like families and kids were coming back again and again.
Right. Yeah.
So it was really great, and there are no pictures of it online at the moment. There's still not any pictures.
Why is that?
It's because we did everything on a budget. Sean had a friend of his, an amazing photographer, take all these pictures, but he hasn't sent them to us yet, and because he's doing it for free, we haven't pushed him. I think he had a loss in the family, so we sort of haven't pushed it. But that's one of the reasons why we needed funding, and we even said it at the time, not just to pay the artists' fees for the work they were doing and to pay for all the costs of running it, but also, keeping the momentum up afterwards, and producing the catalogue would have been nice. Yeah. Being able to pay the photographer, being able to pay someone to get it all online, and everything, all that stuff. Yeah. And it's important because for anyone who didn't go, there's just a poster on the website. They don't really know, and so it's really important that we do that. But I haven't had the time, and I haven't got the photographs. And in the past I've done all of that, done all the archive for WW, and it's really, really exhausting. So I've been a bit lax on all of that. And that's the other reason why doing all those shows that we were doing back in the beginning, 8 shows, 10 shows a year, it's all of that website updating, all those photos for every show, and all the press marketing, and it's just full on. It's just really, really full on, and you have to pace yourselves. Yeah. But so after doing the Nail and Rock show here, which was great, I've done a couple of little things, but I've sort of taken a bit of a break again.
Take some time off, do some painting.
Trying to do some painting, yeah. I had a solo show of my own work in September. But so I had a solo show in September, and that was my first the first solo show of my work for about 20 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Because I've always been showing other people's
Yeah.
work, and that was a really strange experience for me, and I felt for the first time like, oh, I really need a curator to help me because I'm so used to looking at other people's work and sort of saying, oh, maybe we considered this, and and that's the benefit of being an artist and a curator, is I think that's the difference between sort of an academic curator and an artist curator, is if you have got that interest and that genuine interest and sensitivity towards practice, someone's practice or materials or whatever it is, then you can come in and you can sort of question, or why have you put that there, or is there a reason why that's there, and just sort of provoke them a little bit, like, in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it's always easier for someone else to see it, like when you were curating each other's shows, you said. And when I did this solo show, I felt really, really sort of naked. and I didn't, I had a couple of friends look and sort of give me, but I just sort of had to do it, and it was a different experience. And unlike when I curate shows and I host them and private views, and I'm always sort of feel in control.
Business mode.
Exactly. For my solo show, I got so drunk on the private view because I just kind of thought, and I just drank, and I was just completely just the opposite. It was just I went into artist mode, and
sounds great.
And I let the lady who was organising it kind of do the business thing.
Yeah.
The business mode thing.
I mean, that's how it should be, really,
that's how
isn't
it should be, yeah. But it was scary. It was definitely scary for me.
Especially after a break of like 20 years.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I've had bits of my work in shows.
Yeah, but
not
solo.
when it's just all eyes. And it did propel my practice forward a little bit, and so I'm excited about making work again, and I mean, it's still tough balancing that with a very demanding 4.5-year-old, but we'll see. That's really why I've taken a pause from Dry Run and a pause from Solo Award, partly to reevaluate those things, but also to spend a bit of time this year pushing my own practice forward, doing some painting. I mean, I'm not just a painter. The September show, it was an installation, and there's sculpture and there's painting, and you'll be able to see on my website. Just sort of giving myself a chance really for a change. And one thing I would say, having done the artist thing, done the curator thing, done the gallerist thing, done the art fair thing, one thing I would say is that although I still like talking and meeting people and all of that and engaging, if I manage to focus on my work and manage to make some good work, and someone wants to come along and show my work and sell my work, I would be so absolutely delighted for them to have their 50% or 40%, because I know how hard that is. Very different from the mumblings, maybe my own mumblings and other people's mumblings when you're starting out as an artist. Oh, galleries, they really rip you off. And that's why it's also really good to do both.
Yeah, absolutely.
To really appreciate how, people just see you. People used to just see me looking glamorous at a private view, sipping prosecco, and just think, oh yeah, she's got a charmed life. And it's like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. So yes, absolutely, I'd be absolutely delighted for someone to take their percentage on my work. So we'll see. But yeah, 2019 for me is about being more, being less altruistic and more selfish, I think.
Great.
Sounds good. That's sort of a good place to wrap it up then, I think. Yeah.
Thank you for having us in the studio, and thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you.